But the recommended vitamin D intakes have gone up a little bit lately to 600 international units and 800 when you're above 71 and up. But many experts are now suggesting at least 1,000 and some 2,000, 3,000. My doctor suggested 3,000, but anyway. And then I got it checked again so I could see what worked. It took a little bit of talking my doctor into it to get him to agree to that. But there's also a place called the Vitamin D Council that you can write and just get your own test done if your doctor doesn't agree, because they don't really want the medical system loaded up with people just wanting to know their vitamin D levels. But it is worthwhile for us to learn that. And so you can just bring your vitamin D up to recommended levels, and it seems tied in with the prevention of a lot of chronic diseases. There have also been recent questions about vitamin D2 and D3. Vitamin D3 used to be only animal source. In fact, in our first books we were mentioning that vitamin D3 was animal source, but now they've got the synthetic versions of vitamin D3 which are not animal source, so can be considered vegan. And if you're taking amounts 4,000 international units or below, it seems they're equally effective. So if you want to get something like that, you can just search on the internet for vegan vitamin D3. B12. Now this is one that we want to make sure that people get right, because sometimes there's beliefs that you can get it from plant foods or internal production, but you can't. So some of the things that people think would be possible sources, I know, Mrs. Butenko, she said she doesn't mind when a bug falls in her smoothie because there's some vitamin B12. But you don't get vitamin B12 from plant foods, sprouts or dirt or seaweeds, except in a few unsavory conditions. And so we want to look at, okay, then what are the reasonable sources and reliable sources? There's a little bit of research on chlorella, AFA, that showed that it raised the B12 levels of some vegans who were B12 deficient. In a small group study, about 80% of the people had their B12 levels raised, but not everybody. So again, it's not one that we really want to rely on at this point, till there's a bit more research. So the raw and vegan studies consistently show that if people don't take supplements or fortified foods, their levels of B12 gradually drop. So the B12 levels in raw vegans were about 100 to 200 picograms per mil, whereas the recommended levels are 2 to 4 times that. A good website, if you ever want to look, is Jack Norris. He's a dietitian in California, veganhealth.org. He really keeps up to date on vitamin B12 research. It's very good. Another fun website to have if you want to get regular emails is Dr. Michael Greger, nutritionfacts.org. And B12 deficiency, and I hadn't heard of this so much until lately actually happening to people, but in the last while I've had a few people phone me, one from Rome and 2 from Paris, that had B12 deficiency with these real symptoms. And because they don't have as much supplements or fortified foods there and don't use them. But of course they were starting to now. They could, when they had started to have some of these symptoms, they could get a quick injection and have things just turned around in like a day and a half. Very, very quick. But there can be exhaustion because the blood isn't, the cells get bigger but they don't divide normally. So they're called megaloblastic. They're big cells. And people get more irritable. They're really having trouble with things. Nerve damage, and that part on the long term can be very dangerous. Gastrointestinal disturbances and high homocysteine. So here you've got a way of eating that's tremendously protective for your heart, but then undermine it by the high homocysteine and increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. And for infants, it's very difficult too. So our body produces a little bit of B12 in the saliva and way down in the intestine, but it isn't enough and it's not absorbed at the right site for the intestinal purpose. B12 stores, here's one again that I've sometimes been concerned when women who were going through pregnancy didn't take care with vitamin B12. With adults, we've got a fair amount. Like if we go without B12, we could go for a few years, and we'll be fine. People have even gone as long as 20 years with no obvious source of B12, and they were just recycling. Babies don't have those stores to start with, so they'll get deficient really quickly and develop seizures, a kind of lethargy that's really dangerous, and it's tragic outcomes. So we want to make sure that people during pregnancy make sure they have vitamin B12 intake, a reliable source. And over the age of 50, all people on any diet seem to absorb the form are advised to take the form that's in supplements or fortified foods, because 1 in 3 of us absorbs that kind much better, and we usually don't know who it is. So the reliable sources are, for example, nutritional yeast. That's pretty good, and the reason I say the supplements are better, they're more tightly regulated for amount. And so we want to get about 4 micrograms a day at 2 or more meals if we're having it from a fortified food. And there's non-dairy milks and veggie meats and nutritional yeast that have it. Or you can get 25 micrograms a day from supplements, which usually they have that amount. Or you can have twice a week a B12 supplement, like just a single dose twice a week. Fats, I mentioned a little bit about this. The really good ways to get your fat are from whole foods. The nuts, the seeds, the avocados, these are just great. They're packed with antioxidants. They help you absorb minerals. They provide many nutrients. And the omega-3 fatty acids, women need about 2.2 grams, men about 3.2. And if you think of that and then look for some choices that you might have, it might be like a handful of walnuts, it might be some flaxseed oil in a dressing or hemp seed oil, some hemp seeds in a smoothie. There are quite a few different choices. You can get a lot from leafy greens, but you have to eat lots. But then of course people on raw diets are eating lots. Salads are big often, so that can work to be a major contributor. They're the long-chain omega-3s, and I'm questioning the research on that right now, whether we need to get these long-chain omega-3s. We aren't quite sure if people need to use supplements or not. Probably they don't need to, but because some of us convert very efficiently. But if you do want to get the long-chain omega-3s, and particularly this would be for somebody in pregnancy or who's diabetic, there are some options, and you can just do a search for vegan DHA, and that'll solve that. Then iodine, that isn't something that people think about very much, but when we're eating a lot of these cruciferous vegetables or flax seeds, if we don't have enough iodine in our diet, this can affect our body's ability to make thyroid hormone. But if you get enough iodine from somewhere, you're okay. So some of the ways we can get iodine are from iodized salt, and there's kelp, or look and see whether your multivitamin mineral has iodine in it. So anyway, that's just another area. And we've kind of summarized all this in our Cooking Vegetarian, or I think there's a copy out there, it's called Cooking Vegan, but it's the American version of the same book. And with this, we get superb health and great food. I mentioned some of the problem areas, like the kind of troubleshooting areas. We can also have really good food. This is one of my favorites, a mango pie. It's in our Becoming Raw book. And it only has 4 ingredients, mango, and the crust is dates, nuts, and coconut. It's really simple to make. Anyway, now with this kind of a diet, we definitely reduce our risk of obesity, and some of the data that's just come out in the last couple of weeks, really strong data, shows that we cut our risk of heart disease by 32%, of the gastrointestinal cancers by 24%, and the female cancers, so that's the breast, ovarian, these hormone-related cancers, by 34% compared with non-vegetarians. And these are some of the studies that are very, very recent. With regard to chronic disease and raw diets, we don't have that much data. So that last one was on vegetarian and vegan. For raw, we've got really strong evidence for possible risk reduction for rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, and overweight and obesity. With arthritis, people on living food diets, and this is some of the information from Finnish studies, there are quite a few done, and I find that the arthritis associations are only starting to become aware of these. They're only starting to get them on their website. Some of the articles by Kelsen Craw that were done in the 90s. But what they found, so a group of people in Finland went on a raw vegan diet. It was gluten-free, it had no citrus, it had no dairy, of course. They weren't using raw milk, and no nightshades. And they found that they got less morning stiffness, joint swelling, pain, their laboratory markers changed, the bacteria in their intestines changed, that's the fecal flora, so all these little bacteria that are in there, which actually many of them can help us health-wise, started to change. And there was lower cholesterol, better antioxidant status. And then when people went back on their earlier diet, if they did, their benefits disappeared. Now it turned out it wasn't the same trigger for everybody, so it seems that there may be some links with food sensitivities and rheumatoid arthritis, although we're not quite sure what the pathway is or how that works, the causative factors. But it seems that when people went on a raw vegan diet, which you leave out all these things like wheat, you leave out sugar, you leave out a lot of junk, people got better. And so there's still, research would be more welcome in that area. With fibromyalgia, the same kind of situation. There were studies done in the US and several studies in more recent years, and also in Finland with the living food diet. So that was a lot of sprouted food and so on. And there were significant improvements in their morning stiffness and pain. And these diets are high in anti-inflammatories, so are vegetarian and vegan diets, and lots of antioxidants. They support these healthy bacteria in your intestines. You reduce the food sensitivity culprits, and there's weight loss, which can help on a person's joints. So a lot of advantages that help these and other chronic diseases.